It's told about a young man who by no fault of his own had lost his job. The factory where he worked had closed down. He had no money to support his family. He felt like he had no choice but to turn to a life of crime. But he wasn't a violent man. He never hurt anyone in his life. So he figured the best way to make money was to burglarize homes and to steal people's belongings. He didn't own a gun, or he never carried a gun, but he had one gun in his house. And he broke it into many homes in his neighborhood, and he always wore a mask where no one could see him. This one particular night, he had been watching this home for several days, and he saw no activity around this house. So he said, "That's my next target." And as he walked out of his house, he doesn't know why, but he reached into the drawer and he picked up the gun and he put it in his pocket. And he sat outside the home to make sure no one was there, and he put the mask on and he went inside the house in the front door. And as he did, he realized no one was there. He took the mask off and he threw it down. And just as he did, he heard a noise upstairs. And he went upstairs and he flicked on the light in one of the bedrooms, and there was an old man and an old woman cowering in the corner. And as he looked down the barrel of the gun and he pointed it at the woman, his hands began to shake and he began to sweat. And he said, "No one has seen my face, but now you have. I have no choice. I've got to kill you." The old woman sat there for a moment, and finally she stood up and she squared her shoulders and she said, "Young man, you may kill me tonight, but you will go to your grave knowing my name." And he said, "Very well. What is your name?" She said, "My name is Elizabeth." And he got a sense of recognition when he looked in this woman's face, and the sweat began to pour even more. And he began to shake as he started to pull the trigger. And he said, "I could never kill anyone named Elizabeth. That was my mother's name." So he turned his attention to the old man who was still cowering in the corner. And as he pulled the hammer back on the gun, the old man finally squared his shoulders up and he said, "Young man, I've seen your face. You may kill me tonight, but you too will go to your grave knowing my name." The young man said, "Okay, sir, what is your name?" He said, "My name is Harold, but all my friends call me Elizabeth." Here in a few minutes, we've got a few Alabama fake riders in here. Maybe some of y'all from Oklahoma can explain it to them when you're out messing around tonight. Ron, would you hand me my water right there, please? I am Chris Sullivan. It's not my real name. It is my legal name. And I'm from a place called Cordele, Georgia, which is about 70 miles south of Macon, Georgia, and about 70 or 80 miles north of Valdosta, Georgia, right on 75. I'm sure many of you traveling down 75 have probably seen Cordele, got the big rocket there. That's where I live now. My wife and my daughter and I live there. And I just want to tell you guys how honored I am to be here with you today. My first event with Faith Riders was in Daytona this past year, and I'm telling you, I was sold out. I was sold out at that moment on what Faith Riders stands about. Where's Brother, those words, man, incredible. Where's he at wrote that song? Where's Brother Incredible? Amen. That had to come from God, brother. I've talked to you. You're not that smart. It had to come from God. And young lady, I want to challenge you, and I want to I've got my daughter's right here. She's 16 years old, and my daughter's a singer, and she plays just about anything with a string on it. And I want to charge you right now: don't you ever use that voice that God has given you to curse His name. Do you hear me? You keep singing the praises of God, and I guarantee you, He will bless you in ways you cannot possibly imagine. Amen? Everywhere I go, I carry water with me. And people say, well, you must drink water because you're in excellent shape. But you must drink water all the time. And I said, well, this I do drink water quite a bit. I try to drink but this is something completely different. When I was down this past summer down in St. Simon's with our state rally, I realized the importance of this water. See, we were at a Methodist retreat. And there was a lot of Methodists running around down there. And I realized that if I witnessed to them and they received Jesus Christ, all I had to do is go, they pretty much done. We didn't have to worry about dunking them. There they are. There they are. Because you know there's a lot of lost folks out there. Most of them are Methodists, but we won't get into that. I'm just teasing. I pick on the Methodists because Episcopalians don't beat you up, so you gotta find somebody. But you know, I do tease my brothers and sisters in Christ. I love the Methodists. One thing that I discovered about the Methodists that the Baptists won't do, the Methodists will actually speak to you in the liquor store. So you get another Baptist in there, he won't even act like he knows. Years ago, before I came to the Lord, I took a Baptist preacher out fishing with me, and he drank all my beer. The next time I went, I took him and a deacon, neither one of them drank it. So I think I was good to go on that. But I want to share with you tonight, or this afternoon, they've given me the hardship. I got to keep all of you guys awake after you ate. Some of you have already kicked your shoes off, some of you laid down, that's all right. As long as you hear what I want to share with you today. I want to talk to you guys about death. About death. And let me tell you guys just one more thing and tell you a little bit more about me. I'm an itinerant evangelist. I'm not a pastor. I have pastored churches. The most difficult job I've ever had in my life. I don't like to do a whole lot, so I became an evangelist. But people go, well, what does an itinerant evangelist mean? That means I'll go anywhere where there's a big enough check. I had a guy call me several years ago and he said, and I had spoken at almost, and I was just kidding about that, so y'all, we're on a budget here, that's all I'm saying. But I go on a speak, I don't care about denomination. I was ordained Southern Baptist, I was raised Southern Baptist, but folks, first and foremost, I'm a follower of Christ. Amen. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. You can be Pentecostal, you can be Assembly of God, you can be Church of Christ, you can be Catholic, you can be whatever, except for Methodist. You can be whatever you want to be. But if you're not a follower of Christ, all that doctrine and all that theology means squat. Amen. We should all be followers of Christ. So first and foremost, I am a follower of Christ. I had a guy a few years ago call me up and say, Brother Chris, I've had some people in my church and they heard you speak at a youth event and we would really like for you to come and speak for our youth. Would you do that? And I said, I would be more than happy to do that. I'd love to go and talk to young people. And he said, well, what do you charge? And I said, well, to tell you the truth, I charge nothing. I charge nothing. Whatever the church feels like they can give, then that's what I take. I've gone in debt to go and speak at churches, and I've had some that have blessed me beyond measure. So it all comes down to the watch. God takes care of me and my family. And he said, well, Brother Chris, he said, we got $1,000 set aside for a speaker. Is that enough? And I said, how much you say? He said, we got $1,000, but we got a couple of concerns. Some of the older people in the church, he said, we're a Catholic church. I said, that's all right, Catholics need Jesus. And he said, well, some of the older people in the church wish that you were Catholic. I said, how much you paying? He said, Brother Chris, we got $1,000 set aside to pay somebody. I said, you know what? I'll send you Sunday morning. But today I want to talk to you about a subject we don't want to talk about is death. We don't like to talk about death, but we see these books, we see these manuals about life after death. And I hear, oh, there's no life after death, everything gets dark, or maybe you just go into the light. There's really not a lot that happens after death. We're going to talk about that today and how we're going to do that. One of the most important things that I think that Faith Riders does, in my humble opinion, as I've been only involved in a few months, is the testimony. Is sharing the testimony. Why is that so important? Because everybody's got one. Everybody's got a testimony. Everybody has a before, how they came to know Jesus, and then after. See that, my Bible, and Chris, what does that have to do with that? My Bible says in Galatians 2:20, it says, I have been crucified with Christ. I no longer live. You may be sitting in these chairs right here, right now, trying to keep your eyes open, but the truth of the matter is, you've died. At least I hope you have died at one point. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. You've already died, people. And if you haven't, then you need to look at your life and need to look at your salvation walk. What's that have to do with testimony? Well, you need to have died in order to have that afterlife with Jesus Christ. That's just all there is to it. So I thought what I would do today is I would share with you one of the questions that I'm asked all the time, and I get this from some of my WWF buddies and some of my WCW buddies. They contact me and they say, Chris, of all people, we never would have imagined that you would be a Christian. How many of you guys have heard that? Never would have imagined that you would be the one telling people about Jesus Christ. We figured some husband would have killed you years ago. Or you would have drank yourself to death, but we never would have imagined. And people ask me all the time, say, well, Chris, how did you go from basically growing up on television, how did you go from being this man to being this man now? And I was wondering if I could just share that with you. Now, I'm telling you right now, it's going to take more than 3 minutes. I told you I'm ordained Southern Baptist. We have no concept of time. and he gave me the next 2 or 3 hours, so y'all just hang on with me, and we'll serve you some food if we have to, get some crackers and wine, and we'll go through that if you get hungry. But I want to share with you how I came to be a Christian. And maybe we can learn something. Maybe we can laugh a little bit, might shed a tear a little bit. I was listening to Brother Tony here last night talk about some of the things that happened in his life, and the parallels in my life were astounding as I listened to him. But the thing I learned from him and from many others in my life, and the reason I want to share this with you today, is because I want you to understand something. That no matter where you come from in life, I don't care if you're rich, I don't care if you're poor, I don't care if you're old, I don't care if you're young, I don't care if you're male, I don't care if you're female, I don't care if you ain't figured out what you are right now. Jesus Christ can use you. Amen. Are you breathing? Jesus can use you. I hear people tell me all the time when I say, I would like for you to go on a mission trip with me, or I would like for you to go and serve in some capacity somewhere. When I'm out in the field, they go, well, God can't use me for anything. Well, if He can't use you for anything, He might as well just stop your breathing. He can use you. Now, it may not be to go out and to preach to hundreds of people or thousands of people, but He can simply use you to tell about your life and tell how you came to know Jesus Christ as your Lord and your Savior. Can I share a little bit about my life, or a lot about my life? Now, people, I'm going to tell you something. It's not an easy thing for me to do. I kind of try to stray away. I've shared it maybe one time this year at St. Simon's, but I try because it does bring up a lot of negative memories. It brings up a lot of bad things in my life. I'm 50-something years old, and I still deal with a lot of those things. Emotional scars last in eternity, or at least until I quit breathing on this earth. They last forever. As Tony started out last night, and I'll start the same way. I was born into an impoverished family. I had 3 siblings. There was many times that we sat down at the table between the 5 or 6 of us. There was just a bowl of macaroni and cheese. That was it. But you see, we didn't know we were poor. We just thought that was all part of life. When I was about 6 years old, I attended this little missionary Baptist church, and this pastor came up to me and he said, "Chris, you need to get saved and you need to get baptized." I didn't know what that meant. I said, "Okay." So I went down front and I knelt and we prayed this little 30-second sinner's prayer. A couple of weeks later, he took me and he dunked me in some water and he said, "Now go be a Christian." Listen to me, people. Sunday school teacher, pastor, deacon, faith writer, mother, father, I don't care in what capacity you serve. Do not do that to a young Christian. Amen. And I'm not talking about age. They might be 45 years old like I was before I came to know Jesus Christ. But I'm still a babe. You see, I thought what the world was telling me that when I became a child of God, all my problems was over. I was 6 years old. I was a child of God. I was not going to have any more problems. Folks, it had only just begun. It had only just begun. I heard Brother Tony share with you last night. My father was a man that I loved very much. I respect him. He was the first male influence in my life. My father was a drunk. My father was an alcoholic. I rarely remember a day or a night when my father wasn't drinking. And of course that led to all sorts of skirmishes in our family and fights between my mom and my dad. But I loved that man and I respected that man. He was a hard worker. He was a kind man. He was a gentleman. But he was a drunk. He was a drunk. We never had a lot of positive interchange or exchange with my father. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, my father came home one night and I asked my father for some money. And I think it was to go get something from Dairy Queen. I really don't even remember. And my father had already started drinking. Budweiser was his drink of choice. But he had already started drinking. And I went up and I said, "Daddy, can I have some money to go buy an ice cream or something?" And he said, "I don't have any money." Well, my mama heard it. And the fight began. Well, if you had to spend all your money on this or on this, you would have money for all your kids. And as it always happened, the fight began. My father got up and walked out of the house. Last time I ever saw my father alive. That night, 2 men murdered my father. They left him laying in the streets for several hours, dead. And some of you are going, "Oh, that's terrible," folks. Let me tell you something. Here's the hard part. My brother and I shared a room. And my mother came in the middle of the night and she woke my brother up. And she said, "Trey, they just found your father dead." And I sat up in the bed and I said, "Mom, I see this as though it's happening before me right now." I said, "Mama, what did you say?" She said, "They just found your father dead and it's your fault, you SOB." Folks, grown folks don't know how to deal with death. We have problems dealing when loved ones are taken from us. I'm 6 years old. The man that I loved and worshipped in my life is gone, and it's my fault. And the woman that was my mother told me that night, sitting on the edge of that bed, that I was no longer her son. She took an oath and said, "I'm through with you. I'll never love you again." And until my mother died just a few years ago, she kept that promise. When I got baptized, the preacher gave me a little white Bible. And he said, "You go home and you read this Bible." Folks, it's the King James Bible. It was. Grown folks, we can't understand it. I'm 6 years old trying to read a King James Bible. But I made up my mind that I was going to read this Bible no matter what. hang on a nightstand beside my bed. And as I laid there in the bed and I looked up into the dark, and tears were pouring down my eyes, and I began to think about my father, and the words that my mother said just burned into my heart. I didn't know anybody else to blame, so I looked to God. Why? Why are you doing this to me? I was just a little boy. I wasn't a bad child. I was a prankster. I had a good disposition. I loved people. And I took that Bible off of my nightstand and I closed it. And I set it down and I said, no more. And that began a lifestyle of hating God. Folks, now I'm not just talking about disliking religion. I'm not talking about tolerating somebody speaking of God in my presence. Folks, if you came to me and you even mentioned to me the name of Jesus Christ, not only would I cuss you out, but there was a good chance that there was going to be a verbal altercation before it was over. God had taken my father. God had taken my mother. It was my fault. That preacher promised me that I was a child of God, so only God could be doing this to me. So to hell with God, I'm through with Him. I'm done. My mother was not a good woman. My mother was a very promiscuous woman. As a matter of fact, it was my mama's affair that got my father killed. Men rotated in and out of our house over the next couple of years. I would go to bed, there'd be one man there. Get up the next day, there'd be another man there. She became a drug addict. She became an alcoholic. And oftentimes, my mother would pack us up into the car, and she would take us out to the nightclubs that she went to. And while she was out doing her thing, sometimes we would sit in the car till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I had an 18-month-old brother. And I had to take care of him. And we sit in the car till 2 or 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. I've seen the sun rise in the Buick LeSabre many times. While my mother was out doing what she wanted to do. This one particular night, my mama loaded us up and took us to Dothan, Alabama. Now, some of y'all from over in that area may have heard of the Bonfire Club. It's still there. Or it was 15 years ago. Well, my mother took us over there. And I remember her walking into the doors of the bar. And I remember it like it was yesterday as the door closed. Because I didn't see her again for nearly 3 years. See, my mother left us in the car that night. We stayed in that car for 4 days. All we had was some crackers. We drank water from a water spigot behind the bar. And we gave my little brother and my little sister water and what few crackers and snacks we could come up with. Finally, law enforcement found us and they took us. When I saw my mother 3 years later, I said, Mama, I asked a question. I ask a question to this day. I wish I'd have never asked. I said, why? Mama, why? My mama looked me in the face and said, I wanted you dead. I had no more use for you. You were in my way. My mama meant that. Folks, I'm 55 years old. I weigh 270 pounds. I can pick up the rear end of a bus. Every time I say that, my knees go weak. Every time I think about that, how could you? I got $2. I can't imagine not loving my children. I can't imagine not giving up everything I have for my child. I can't imagine not starving so that my child will have food to eat. I can't imagine not giving up my motorcycle. That's hard to imagine. But I would give it up if she needed something like it was nothing. And I don't believe there's a person in here that wouldn't do the same thing for your child. Folks, that is nothing but pure evil. My grandfather took us in, the four of us in, and he was my father's father. And my father's father was a wealthy man. He was well respected in the community, but my father had married the town harlot, and we were the offspring of that relationship. Folks, I want to ask you a question. How many times have you seen a child, black, white, green, yellow, I don't care, and you know that child came from the wrong side of town, and you looked at them and say, you know what, they're going to wind up just like their mama and their daddy, and you kick them to the curb. Folks, I'm here to tell you, as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, I was that child that so many Baptists and so many Methodists and so many Christians rode by our house and knew we were hungry, rode by our house and knew we were being abused, rode by our house and knew that we needed things in our life and dare not stop by and say, can I help? Because we were from the wrong side of the tracks. Every one of y'all know somebody like that right now. Right now. I go to prisons. I do prison ministry. And if you sit there and you talk to those prisoners and just listen to their story, you will hear almost every one of them say, you know what? Somebody gave up on me. The world just gave up on me. My grandfather took us in, and I remember sitting on the sofa. As a matter of fact, there's a picture of it somewhere of us sitting on the sofa. My grandfather is sitting there beside us. And he took us in, and all this hate and all this anger that he had for my mother was cast down to us. And he was by far the meanest man I've ever met in my life, bar none, that I've talked to serial killers. But I remember him sitting there and he said, now listen, I want you guys to understand this very clearly. I'm taking you in not because I care whether you live or die, not because I love you, but I'm more concerned about what the people of the church will think if I don't. Meanest man ever lived. Physically broke me. The physical scars I could take, the emotional scars I still carry to this day. My grandfather's been dead 20 years. You know, he still controls parts of my life. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? So through my teenage years and through my formative years, my grandfather was abusive. He beat us. He used to tell us that we were never worth anything, that we would never amount to anything. Like TJ said, worst $200 I've ever spent. He told me there was a prison cell waiting for me when I just got old enough. One of the worst whippings I ever got in my life was I was standing there one night at the end of my bed, and I was thinking about my mother, and I began to cry. And that was the worst whipping I've ever got, because crying was a weakness. Men did not cry. Hate was okay. Prejudice was okay. All of that stuff was okay, but don't you dare shed a tear like a girl. Well, by the way, my grandfather was a